little balance.
Good evening. I'd like to call the City of Twinsburg Caucus meeting for January 10th, 2023 to order. It is 7 p.m. Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Barr?
Here.
Mrs. Walker?
Present.
Mr. Post?
Here.
Mrs. Labby? Here. Mr. Bellin?
Here.
Mr. Deeds?
Here.
Mr. Fury?
Here.
Wonderful. Shannon, do we have any presentations this evening?
We do not.
All right. Moving on, items for discussion. Tonight, Rebecca Ziegler, our Economic Development Director, has an update on our zoning code rewrite. So Ms. Ziegler, if you care to share with us. Good evening.
Good evening. All right. So I was asked in October to move forward with a zoning code update, sending out RFPs, as you all know. So those requests for proposals that you all got a copy of, those went out on November 15th, and we had 6 consultants reply by December 5th, the due date. 3 of them were out of state, 3 of them were in state. Our selection committee decided to interview 3 of them who met kind of our baseline criteria. So we did virtual interviews with them during one day and unanimously selected 1 consultant that we would like to move forward with. They checked all of the boxes and then some. So at this point in time, the ballpark for these consultants was anywhere between $100,000 to $158,000 for the 18-month, almost 2-year project. Pretty in line, pretty par for the course for this type of work. It is a complete rewrite of our zoning code, as that hasn't been done since 1989. So, with that being said, we just need approval to move forward with that process. What that would look like is within the next couple of weeks, we would put legislation together that you all would vote on. And then our goal is through this 18-month process that's extensive, a lot of extensive public outreach, but it is to go on to the 2024 November ballot. We do have to have voter approval for that, so that's kind of our timeline. It's a hard and fast timeline of November 2024. So I'm here for any questions. That's kind of the Cliff Notes version. Yep, Zone Co. Zone Co is the company that we would like to move forward with. And they were the higher bid. They were at $158,000. Sorry, go ahead. The reasoning for picking them also, they have a very strong legal background in zoning, which we feel pretty strongly that that's something that we would need. They also had the most public outreach meetings, the most workshops. Many of the other consultants, their baseline of $100,000 to $135,000 was pretty minimal in terms of public outreach. So anything else we added on top of that would have been more money. Probably would have brought it closer to that 158 mark anyway. So Zone Co kind of came in with the bells and whistles already, I guess is a way to put it.
Not everything in our zoning code needs to be voted on. There's a difference between certain if there's a use or a change of, if it affects the building size, I think it has to be voted on. But I didn't think everything in the code had to be voted on. And I was going to ask Mr. Van Zanet, can you comment on that? Because I've had this conversation with Mr. Maestros in the past.
Yeah, it's not every single thing.
Right.
However, when we, myself and Ms. Ziegler kind of mapped out the process, we're kind of treating the outreach piece as, here's the whole code. This is all going to be on the November ballot, and it's going to replace the entire code to kind of make it clear for the public's purposes that, while to your point, when we do individual zoning code changes, we evaluate them whether or not they trigger the referendum process. Here, we're currently of the opinion that we should put the entire code on the ballot, let it all be voted on for purposes of clarity for the electorate's purposes.
That's fine. Thank you.
Instead of doing, pieces.
I mean, so you're going to put 200 pages on the ballot.
As well, we'll put a question on whether or not to approve.
Okay.
The zoning
I'm
code.
just saying that,
Yeah.
but you're basically at the end of the
this
day,
time,
your book's going to be 200 pages. So you would be yes or no. Are we going to use the new code or stay with the current code?
That I believe is the current approach that we've determined. Obviously that's also how we've styled it when we sent out requests for proposals to the different zoning code rewriting companies. And at this stage, we just believe that for the purposes of clarity, to really tie into getting maximum outreach maximum public comment. And if we just say, here's where it ends, here's what we're going to all do, and here's the process of how we get there, and these are all the different ways you can get involved and have your say with the council about what this document should look like.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Ballin?
Yeah, so I was part of the initial selection committee, so I sat through and reviewed all of the RFPs, and I, as Mrs. Ziegler points out, I was really, it was very important to me, the public outreach portion of this particular project. We have had several issues with our zoning code over the last several years, where it's either been called into question or what have you. And I personally felt, and I think that the rest of the committee agreed, that getting the public involved and giving them ample opportunity to get involved throughout this process, I think is really important. Because to your point, Mr. Fury, yes, we're effectively going to be asking the electorate to vote on a 200-page zoning code. And I think, there's going to be a lot of outreach, not only during the process, but I would imagine after the proposed code is completed to educate the public of, hey, here's what's in here, here's what we changed, here's what we took out, those kind of things. That's far above my pay grade to be able to do that. And so I will fully support zone code.
I also think it's important that when we go to the vote, that it's not an us against them thing.
Correct.
There aren't two sides, right? We want to all be on the same page, so everyone is saying, yes, pass is the way it is. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mr. Deeds?
So do we have to spend the entire $158,000 in order to get a vote? Or are we spending, let's say, $50,000 to put together a framework? Everyone votes on that, and then we spend another $128,000, and I'm just tossing numbers out here, that for the consultant to finalize it.
Start to finish, it would be $158,000. They do section it off into public outreach component costing this much. They begin by doing a complete analysis of our current code. That is set at a dollar amount as well. They give that report back. The public outreach component, the draft component, the numerous draft components, and then they would literally go lockstep with us all the way through to the voting process. So that entire process encompasses the 158. And I would argue it all or nothing. I wouldn't just hire them only for the analysis of it. I would have them take us all the way through.
But we have to spend $158,000. We have to spend the entire $158,000, and if then it gets voted down, then we spent $158,000 for nothing.
There is that chance. Yep.
Is there any way to separate it, where we can put together a framework where they do, let's say, the majority of the work, maybe they spend $100,000, and that gets us to a vote, and then the $58,000 is the crossing the T's, dotting the I's, all those things.
I think that's a good question. We've also thought, we do have staff internally that could do some of this work. We have a law director that could do some of this work. I think because of the contention behind the zoning code and the issues, even just since I've been here and the amount of legal issues we've been going with, we want to put our best foot forward and give it all we have. This is a really, really big ask from the community and our taxpayers. So I think asking to just kind of cut out $30,000, $40,000, which is a lot of money, that $30,000, $40,000 would probably be the difference between it passing or not, just because they would help us through the entire process. The public outreach is going to be crucial. To answer your question, I don't see how they could only kind of cut some things back, have staff do more, which we will be doing a lot, to save money. I don't know where they would cut that portion out.
I think it's better to spend what is necessary to do it right.
Let's do it right.
It's been on the books for so long, wrong and whatnot. Whatever it takes to do it right, let's do it right. So that would be, and again, to your point though, we could spend a lot of money, and vote no, but that's why it's so important that we're on the same page and we get the residents behind us also. And there's no opposition to be like, no, let's not pass this. There should be no reason for anyone to say no to this.
Oh, there'll be a reason.
There will be a
People
reason.
will say
People will say no, but
There'll
we
be
should get as much
no
support
mistake.
as possible.
There
And
will
there-
be people
and there
that
shouldn't
will be
be-
totally dissatisfied
Yeah.
with this process. So this is
True of
where,
anything,
this is where I guess I would ask Mayor, the administration, and your department to make this as transparent as possible. Everything from the pro forma to the process to meeting dates. I want to be able to sit up here and, to Mr. Post's point, question why anybody would vote against it. Why any rational individual, after $160,000 worth of expense and outside consultants and legal and everything that we're going to put this through, I want to be able to sit up here with a clean conscience and say, what is the opposition? It wasn't somebody else's idea. It needs to be lawful. It needs to be open and transparent. And I think that we will have the support of the community. I mean, at least for the most part. So that I guess is my only ask, is that we.
And that's why they were chosen, because
together
of,
Twinsburg,
Right.
and the
Exactly.
public outreach. I mean,
And this isn't just to, I'm completely in agreement with you. We have the project page, the Together Twinsburg page, where everything will be posted, but not expecting the community to be checking that website all the time. We need to be going out. The meetings don't need to be happening at council. We need to be going to HOAs. We need to be going to the library. We need to be doing
Facebook,
all of that. All of it.
All the social media stuff.
Yeah,
so,
I'm ready for it, so.
Perfect. All right. So your ask from us would be that we would put together a piece of legislation approving the bid of Zonco for $158,000.
Yes.
Provided that that legislation is put together, what time frame will we be looking at from approval until kind of the beginning of this process?
So if this does say legislation goes through and we're able at the next council meeting to approve that, they would start the next day. They're ready.
So does anybody appear in preparing that legislation or any further discussion regarding that legislation?
Absolutely not.
All right. So Mr. Vazana, Mayor, Ms. Ziegler, if you guys would like to proceed with that, I think we could certainly talk about it at the next meeting. And
perfect, thank you.
let's discuss whether or not we want to read it 3 times or whether we want to read it as an emergency and pass. I will leave that up to the law director again, in the interest of transparency and not rushing something through and making it seem shady or underhanded. Perhaps 3 readings would be best on this. That's just my opinion, so I will defer to my colleagues.
Okay.
Does anyone have anything else from Mrs. Ziegler? Do you have anything else for us?
Nope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Happy New Year. Council, any further items for discussion?
No, sir.
All right. Shannon, we have any audience participation?
You do get one.
Okay.
Up to you.
Wonderful. Hello, sir.
Good evening, Bob Thews, 2229 Demi Drive in the Meadowood plant. Last year I spoke about our golf league wanting to use the golf pavilion for dining events. The mayor and the law director admitted that the contract with the restaurant people did not include the pavilion. But the former mayor had made the decision that he would allow the restaurant to control the pavilion. Therefore, it could not be used by others for outside food services. That was before the state made the ruling on whether it would be a taxable entity. That's been decided. The former mayor is gone, and the leagues and groups that used the pavilion and brought their own food are still here. I am appealing to the new mayor and council to open the pavilion to groups who want to bring in their own food. The groups being in the food and the groups bringing in their own food, and the groups, they actually clean up behind themselves, so there's no need for any additional services from the city. That was bogus to begin with. So it will generate tens of thousands of dollars of golf dollars. I can tell you right now that we our league forfeited $2,500, and you have several other leagues that are bigger than us that would use that and have used it in the past that pulled out of there because they're forced to use the restaurant services. So I would ask you to reconsider what the former mayor's decision before when he used to consider the pavilion, and ask to consider permanently moving back to allowing the pavilion to be used freely, okay, and not requiring it to be used through the restaurant. That's what I asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, did you have something you'd like to add?
I do, Mr. Thews. We've heard you, and ironically, as recent as today, we met in-house to go over that entire contract. And we went over the whole thing, and I believe it's Thursday, we're meeting with the operators of the restaurant to go over this contract as well. And those are some of the things that we've got written down that we're going to speak about. So maybe by the next meeting, I may have an update for you. But we're already on it.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone have anything they'd like to add? Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Shannon, any other participation this evening? All right. That moves us on to item number 5, which is pending legislation. We're going to revisit ordinance 91, 2022 this evening. This is an ordinance for the dedication of Whispering Woods Phase 3 subdivision. Mr. Vazana, would you be kind enough to give us an update on where things stand this evening?
Happily.
Thank you.
So, as I'm sure we sorry, Mark. As I'm sure we all know, we've read this now, I think 5 or 6 separate times with council. The city administration has, met with the HOA, discussed their concerns. We're, working hard to point them in the right direction and make sure we're not just yesterday and today a resource, but a resource for them moving forward in making sure that, the matters that they have before them with their HOA and, in this case it was the transition. We're giving them as much guidance as we can. That being said, from the narrow standpoint of what the legislation sets out to do, which is to accept the public roadways within the development, the city at this point is prepared to advise the council to accept that dedication and ask tonight that the council vote on the matter and not continue it on for what could be its 6th or 7th reading, I think, at this point. And on top of that, I'll say that the mayor and a couple members of the HOA and myself, and the city engineer, we had a good meeting where I think we talked for, it was probably over an hour with the HOA members. And like I said, we're committed to being a resource to the residents and assisting them in these matters. But as it relates to this piece of legislation, and we did explain this as well, that the issues that they are working through aren't issues that are necessarily related to the legislation. Sorry. So again, at this point, the city is not going to say let's kick it 2 more weeks. We're asking that you consider it tonight for a vote.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any discussion or anything like to add? I know Mrs. Labby, you were involved with some of that.
No, we have Doris Moten here from Whispering Woods, and we are all in agreement that this is the right thing to do at this time.
I appreciate it. Mayor, did you?
That's all I was going to say, is after we had our meeting, everybody was aware of what council's hopefully going to do tonight,
Okay.
and they were all in agreement. There were no issues.
Thank you.
Moving along. Ordinance 01-2023. This is an ordinance to enter into agreement with the Suffolk County Public Defender's Office to provide representation of indigent defendants. This is done annually, so this would just be on its first reading, I believe, this evening. Don't believe we're voting on this. No, that'll be its first reading. Any discussion on 01?
Since it's a formality, is there a reason we don't put an emergency clause on it, just get it up, clean it up?
We can also do it
That's a
next
good
week.
question, Mr. Fury.
I don't think there is a reason.
I believe in the past, actually, I guess I'll ask our clerk of council if she remembers, but in the past, have we handled it as an emergency?
In the past, it's been a resolution and we read it.
I just read it once.
Yep.
Are you asking if we can add an emergency clause onto it?
I know you can, I'm just telling you that it, you know.
I don't see a problem with adding an
we've
emergency
done
clause.
this.
Yes, it is a standard agreement, just for, some of the members of council, if you don't remember from last year.
I'll make a motion to add to the standard, a emergency clause, if that works for you. Just get-
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the emergency would be appropriate in this case, because it would ensure that there's absolutely no lapse in providing legal representation to indigent individuals that are facing confinement based on their alleged criminal activity, but
So if we had to read it 3 times, it takes us into February.
That's
30
correct.
days after this, it wouldn't be in effect till middle of March. If you do it as emergency tonight, it's done.
that's correct, Mr. Fury.
Thank you.
Any discussion amongst council with it? Mrs. Walker?
I have a question. You said something about a resolution for this representation of indigent defendants. Would it be a resolution or would it be an ordinance?
I'm of the opinion that it would be an ordinance, and
Okay.
therefore we'd handle it with 3 readings.
Okay.
But as Mr. Fury is pointing out, we can suspend the 3 reading rule and pass it as an emergency, which would cause it to go into effect immediately, and therefore there'd be no time period where we were operating on a holdover contract, last year's contract, and we could just sign a new one and have it ready to go.
All right.
In the past, it was handled as a resolution. This is the first time I've seen this as an or as an ordinance.
No, I was questioning that because Mr. Matt said resolution and I just wanted to
My apologies.
clarify that. That's okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right. So ordinance 01-2023, essentially our annual renewal of this contract. Mr. Fury, will plan on you making a motion to amend it with our standard emergency clause. We'll be reading it and asking council to vote on it after suspension of the rules, so it can go into effect immediately.
That's correct.
All right. Any other questions on 01? Hearing none. Ordinance 02-2023 is an ordinance to enter an agreement with ODOT for Cannon Road from Ravenna Road to Liberty Road. This is on an emergency this evening to allow the agreement to be entered into as soon as possible. Any comment, concerns, questions on that? I know we received some correspondence from the city engineer earlier today. Thanks to Mrs. Labby. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I reached out to Amy just to see what the time frame would be. It's anticipated June through August, and it should take 3 to 4 weeks. So-
Okay. And we just want to get going on this as soon as possible so that we can get it secured and all that stuff. That's my understanding as well. Any other discussion on 02? All right, hearing none, that concludes legislation. That would move us on to miscellaneous. Council, does anyone have any miscellaneous items to discuss this evening? Mayor, anything miscellaneous?
I have nothing, thanks.
All right.
I do have one thing.
Mr. Deeds, absolutely.
So I was part of the, at the BZA meeting on, let me look back at my notes here, December 21st.
Yes.
And Mr. Janis, who lives on Lumen Lane, we did vote, or BZA voted in favor of his,
Variance.
of the, thank you, of the variance. And he asked that at today's meeting that we could,
Wait the 30 days.
thank you, I'm trying to think exactly how I word that, waive that 30-day rule so he can get started with his new fence. And I mentioned that, Shannon, I know you were on vacation, I don't know if you caught that or not. I just wanted to make sure that we took care of that for
The
Mr.
agenda was amended,
Janis.
so at the end of the regular council agenda, there is a motion, it's listed as motion number 3, that Mr. Dees, if you would be kind to make when we get to that point in the agenda.
Got it.
So, yeah, so what we typically do under the new business at the end is Mr. Post has a couple motions this evening that came out of, arose out of a planning commission meeting last month. And then we'll get to your motion for the appeal of the BZA, I believe it was 09-2022. and you just basically make a motion to ask council to waive the 30-day waiting period on the BZA appeal. And you can feel free to, again, kind of restate, that was passed at BZA, if it was passed unanimously, those kind of things, and we'll just sort of walk you through it. We'll make a vote on it, and should be good to go, I believe.
Perfect, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, it is 7:25. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
All right. We call the roll, I guess. Shannon?
Mr. Fury,
Yes.
Mr. Post,
Yes.
Mr. Deeds,
Yes.
Mrs. Labby,
Yes.
Mr. Bellin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Barton.
Yes. Meeting is adjourned. We will see you back here at 7:30.